Type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, commemorating World Press Freedom Day, where does Uganda stand on the press freedoms and the freedom of expression? Today, media practitioners throughout the world mark the World Press Freedom Day and are reflecting on the challenges and opportunities for journalists and the media in general. The press is crucial to the development of any society, given its critical role of informing and educating the public. The media has also taken up key roles of holding accountable public officials and also facilitating the democratization process in many countries, and it is this role that has often landed it in trouble. The Ugandan Constitution, in Article 29, provides for the freedom of expression and that of the media, but there is a lot of fear that these freedoms are fast coming under attack as the political pressure in this country rises. As a result, the media faces challenges ranging from journalists being beaten up, self-censorship, state interference, and journalists being poorly facilitated as media owners focus more on profits. Most of these challenges have been captured by the 14th Annual Human Rights Report released this week by the Uganda Human Rights Commission. So tonight we'll focus on the extent of media freedoms in Uganda today and its wider ramifications for human rights in general. Our guest tonight, Ms. Roselyne Karugonjo, Director of Inspections and Monitoring at the Uganda Human Rights Commission. You're most welcome, Roselyne.
Thank you.
Also joined by Mr. Peter Okello from the Uganda Media Council, from the Media Council of Uganda. You're most welcome, Mr. Jobeli.
Good evening, Edmond, and good evening, listeners.
We expect to be joined by Mr. Vincent, mayanja, a former journalist and now Deputy Secretary General of the Democratic Party. You two will be able to contribute to this discussion. Peter, how free is the media in Uganda today?
Oh, interesting. How free is the media in Uganda today? I would say it's a mixed bag. In that, whereas on the legal, in terms of the legal framework, a lot of the old shackles, what you'd call the old shackles to media freedom, have over the time been challenged in courts and struck out. For instance, the law sedition, the law false news, and so on. A lot of those laws have been either struck out or reviewed. There are some bad ones still that are in the law books, but on the legal policy framework, the policy of liberalization and so on, of the airwaves and so on, the policy front, I would say that things are okay, fairly okay, not yet fully there, but at the same time we find that there are challenges. This week the Human Rights Commission released a report that highlighted, among other things, because their mandate is wider, but among other things, serious gross violation of human rights over the last 1 year. Just yesterday, a global report was released by Freedom House that found that Uganda, press freedom Uganda over the last 12 months has regressed. Uganda has sharply gone down, I think, over 40 places, from about 90-something to now 123rd on the global scale, and Uganda is now ranked with Angola and some other country, but we are on the borderline between countries that are ranked as moderately free and those that are unfree. So the report tells us that we've gone down, and I think the evidence on the ground, if you've been considering the reports we hear from the Human Rights Network for Journalists and so on, especially in terms of the police reaction to the media coverage of the disturbances we've had on the streets over the last 1 year, the walk to work and so on. There has been serious cases of human rights violation of journalists. And so while we mark World Press Freedom Day, maybe it's not a day yet to celebrate, but maybe to reflect on what could have been or what can be.
All right, well, like they say, it's not yet Uhuru. Some people thought there was a lot of freedom introduced by President Museveni when he came to power. Do we see a lot of that being eroded away in the last 1 year?
According to the reports we've got, as I've told you, the Human Rights Commission report, World Freedom Day, the Freedom House report, there's another report by UNESCO. All indications that over the last 1 year or so, press freedoms, especially the conflict between the police and the media, has really eroded the freedoms of the media, if you like. So the question would be, and for those who are interested in research, why perhaps are we seeing this trend? Is this, can we say that, is this something that is going to go away soon? Or is it a trend that is going to be sustained, this kind of relationship with the media and so on? Yesterday I saw the IGP leading a high-powered delegation of police to the World Press Freedom Day event and trying to make a rapprochement to see how they can build bridges. A lot of water has already spilled under the bridge, but I think there's room for re-engagement and perhaps working out a mutually satisfying relationship. But there is contestation indeed. There's sort of the media, the space, the public space, and we must look at this in terms of, in a wider context, because the media freedom of the press, it does not operate in a vacuum.
Yes. So
while we look at it in terms of the press and so on,
it's a mirror of the wider side.
Perhaps it is a contestation and a fight for that space, public space, should it be open and so on, and perhaps it's a sign of the times.
All right, we'll get deeper into the detail on that trend specifically and other things. We've just been joined by Mr. Vincent Mayanja, a former journalist, a veteran journalist, and now Deputy Secretary General of the Democratic Party. You're most welcome, Mr. Mayanja.
Thank you, Edmond. Good evening, listeners and viewers.
Roselyne, talk to us about that report. What's in your report about human rights?
Over the past year, in 2011, the Uganda Human Rights Commission noted some challenges as the media exercised their right to seek, receive, and impart information. Some of them were subjected to torture and ill treatment, and I think the media out there knows better than I did, because they faced it, torture and ill treatment. There were violations of personal liberty, as many of them were arrested and detained over sometimes flimsy charges. Some of them alleged violations of the right to property. Their equipment, their cameras were taken away from them. Some, in the worst instances, were destroyed, but some pictures were deleted of footage of what they had covered were deleted. This was especially during the walk-to-work processions, while they were trying to cover that. In general, there were threats to freedom of expression and the media. If you see the number of journalists that were detained, UHRC received the largest number of complaints in 2011. We also noted that the working conditions of the media practitioners were a challenge, in the sense that they were covering incidents that required them to have at least life insurance, in instances where there was live ammunition, at least bulletproof jackets and things like that. And they risked and went out of their way to cover these stories, and then and some of them were unfortunate to be subjected to torture and ill treatment.
All right.
And also we noted that there was some kind of interference in the independence of the media, especially during the electoral period, last year. All I'm talking about is about last year. Right. There was interference in independence of the media. You'd find some radio stations, even after opposition political parties had paid to come out and campaign.
They went and found padlocks. Some
of them were kicked out at the last minute.
Some generators ran out of fuel.
That wasn't what we were getting. But there were complaints that at the last minute talk shows would be cancelled. On the other hand, there was also a lack of professionalism, where you'd find that journalists engaged in unethical conduct, trying to get bribes, and we also noted that there was weak self-regulation. The UHRC recommended that, among other things, there should be a strengthening of the independent media regulatory frameworks, which would promote a free but responsible media, and also called for a review of all laws that are inconsistent with media freedoms. And we also recommended that police should, action should be taken against errant officers who used excessive force against the media.
All right. I mean, you spoke about bulletproof jackets. I mean, normally we use those when we go to war fronts. Do we need them in the capital?
If live ammunition is flying by, I think...
Is it that intense? Is it a kind of a war situation in the capital when journalists go to cover events? Is it what is happening right now?
Not necessarily, but the point I'm making is if live bullets are flying around, and sometimes they do, especially in the case of what? Of riots, then the journalists need to be protected.
Well, all right. Vincent Mayanja, talk to us about your own perceptions of the freedom of the press in this country right now.
Well, first and foremost, we need to understand the history of the press freedom in this country. It has never been given by the state or the government. It has been fought for. Some journalists have lost their lives. Father Karugonjo was burnt in his vehicle. There is a certain journalist, a Western journalist called Nioje, something like that. Yes. He was killed by Idi Amin. Some other journalists were killed during Obote too. But I think what we need to look at this time around...
There was also an editor of a newsletter called This Week who was never accounted for. He disappeared during this week.
Oh, yes. But we need first of all to look at all these in two perspectives. First, whether the journalists, we the journalists, are ready to fight for our freedom. Or recently I read in the papers that the report is saying that there is self-censorship currently, and if that goes on, then press freedom is not going to be attainable in Uganda. But the second scenario we have is that for the first time in the history of this country, security forces are deliberately targeting journalists who have been deployed to work, but because police has been deployed or security has been deployed to handle a situation, they don't want to handle it in the presence of the media. Just a few days ago, when some activists were demonstrating on the streets because of the way police handled a female politician, I saw a journalist who was explaining his ordeal, closing his eyes, and was telling us that a security man or a policeman sprayed him with paper in the eyes. On the May 12th last year, when President Museveni was sworn in, I went to look at the convoy that brought back Dr. from Nairobi. And you could see that security had been briefed that as they fired tear gas, they beat up people, they had to make it a point that no journalist take such pictures. And I think this is a challenge to us journalists. We need to stand up and say we shall do this in any circumstances. I saw a policeman who jumped off a truck and started hitting a camera journalist who was taking pictures of people who were throwing stones at the police. And that, to me, that is unique. I've not seen it in this country before. I think it is we need to get back to how even the security forces are being sensitized. And we need to know that we are doing a mutual complementary work as journalists and the state.
Right.
Because the journalists are informing you and the state based on that information to do their work. If they think that they can do it alone, then we are not going to attain press freedom first of all, but more importantly, we are not going to attain freedom anywhere else, because freedom abused somewhere is freedom abused everywhere.
Well, but some journalists have been doctoring pictures. A television station made a picture look like a policeman was arresting a woman's breast. How do we go about those, journalists who make up pictures?
Well, I don't think that really...
The Inspector General said yesterday they doctored a television picture to look like they were plucking at a woman's breast. I
think they don't need really to embarrass themselves more.
That's the Inspector General.
Because immediately after Ingrid Turinawe was manhandled or was assaulted, these pictures were flying all over on the internet. That very man was there. I don't think that the television really connived to doctor those pictures, the newspapers, then those people who had the telephone cameras, and they started really publishing them on the internet. I think they should really get serious and they address this situation. They address it well, because it is going to spoil this country.
Well, listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1 tonight, commemorating World Press Freedom Day. Where does Uganda stand on press freedoms and the freedom of expression? Our guests tonight, Ms. Roselyne Karugonjo, Director of Inspections and Monitoring. Ms. Roselyne Karugonjo Segawa, I want to explain the details. Director of Inspections and Monitoring at the Uganda Human Rights Commission. Mr. Peter Okello from the Media Council of Uganda, and Mr. Vincent mayanja, veteran journalist, now Deputy Secretary General of the Democratic. But you two will be able to call in later and contribute to this discussion. Peter, what is the trend? Where are we headed?
Where are we headed? As Vincent has said, rightly, where are we headed? Whether the press will enjoy the freedoms that they yearn for will also be tagged to whether the rest of the country will be free to enjoy the freedoms that are enshrined in the Constitution. And I hope that common sense will prevail as we go along. As Vincent has said, the police, for instance, needs to know that the media are their partners in the work they are doing. And I do know that there is a move to review the laws that relate to the media. For instance, right now in Parliament there is a bill which is supposed to merge the UCC, the Uganda Communication Commission, with the Broadcasting Council to make a communications authority with wide-ranging powers there that will affect the way the media works. The law that sets up the Media Council, the Press and Journalist Statute, is also undergoing a review. Today at the meeting we had at the World Press Freedom Day, one of the speakers told us that the proposals in there will mean, intended that they move the thinking in government is towards stringent, even passing more stringent laws. And for the media, we wait to see the blueprint, the draft. But all that said and done, I think we risk, we cannot downplay the police brutality and what has been meted to the press people on the streets in the protest and the walk to work and so on. But I think also the threats to the freedom of the media should be looked at from many dimensions. For instance, at the individual level, one of the other things you realize that the individual journalists in Uganda, apart from their level of skill, level of training, the orientation, the pay, the facilitation, and so on, is very poor. Majority of them do self-censor. You always write a story with the back of your mind. What will when it comes out, what will the powers that be say? Sometimes there is not even a threat, but the journalists do self-censor. The media stations themselves, the owners, especially up country, a lot of these stations are owned by either business or political interests that are out there to serve very narrow interests, and so on. So the totality, and then most of these media houses are themselves not. You heard the clip from Captain Francis Bawabu in the news. He's saying we pay the media people money that we ourselves earn. So if we don't earn much, we shall pay them less. So, and that is Babu here in Kampala, but across the countryside, the situation is really bad. So whereas the action on the roads and the police brutality, that one is apparent and to be condemned, we think there are other threats, inherent threats, that need to be addressed as we go along.
All right, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. We'll go on for a break. We'll be back.
When Junior lost his appetite, his mother tried all methods to get him to eat. She tried scary stories.
Eat, Tommy, eat, or the big black elephant will come and eat all your food.
She tried magic.
Tommy, if you eat your food, I will turn this handkerchief into sweets. Look, bumble, bumble, boom, boom.
Then she discovered Apetol multivitamin syrup with lysine.
Mommy, I finished all the food. I am number 1.
Apetol multivitamin with lysine is helping mothers to turn mealtime frustration to a fun moment. Apetol has a great taste and contains lysine, which quickly improves your child's appetite and supports healthy growth. Apetol, help for life.
Wait, turn off the music. Guys, please, no like cows. My wife is calling and I told her I was going to the farm.
Honey, how is the farm?
The farm is very fine.
And the cows?
You can hear, they're grazing.
Well, next time tell them to eat grass and not me. I'm seated behind you.
Hi, honey.
Unlike humans, structures built with Hima cement don't lie. Different types of projects require different cement. We offer the widest range of cement products in the market and are most preferred by all kinds of builders. So if you're thinking about building, think Hima cement. Hima cement, part of you from the start.
John, Mike and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also helped friends, seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He's just who he is. Special.
So here's to men like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Nile Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Nile Special. You've earned it.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Accept no substitutes.
Radio 1, FM 90.
Welcome back on Spectrum. Tonight commemorating the World Press Freedom Day. Where does Uganda stand on press freedoms and the freedom of expression? Our guests tonight, Ms. Roselyne Karugonjo Segawa, Director of Inspections and Monitoring at the Uganda Human Rights Commission, Mr. Peter Okello from the Media Council of Uganda, and Mr. Vincent Mayanja, veteran journalist and now Deputy Secretary and also Deputy Secretary General of the Democratic Party. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. Roselyne, there was a time you had some laws you wanted to provide to float, in cabinet, in parliament, to create a better working environment for the media. Also, you planned at some stage to create a complaints desk. Talk to us about those two things.
For the media.
Yes, laws relating to the media.
Yes. With regard to the media, we've of course analyzed laws that have an impact on the media. We know that the proposed amendment provides threats, but I can't talk too much about it because we have not yet presented our views to Parliament. But we've heard from media professionals who allege that the proposed amendment to the Act is really has the potential to gag the media. We've analyzed other bills. Unfortunately, we didn't receive most of the views that we gave were not incorporated. It was the communication that there was another bill that related to communication and tapping of phones, mobile phones. That also relates to expression. But in terms of working with the journalists, we have a memorandum of association with the Uganda Journalists Association. We also have a good collaboration with the Human Rights Network for Journalists.
You have a memorandum of understanding.
Yes, right. Where we will do a joint project involving carrying out human rights education, especially for the press. And the press will also have their own projects to strengthen their own capacities, especially in human rights reporting.
Okay.
Then we do have a human rights defenders desk that's looking out for human rights defenders in the media. The media plays an important role in the promotion and protection of human rights. As they seek, as they receive and impart information, many of them are engaged in the promotion and protection of human rights. As they, for example, he gave an example of the journalist who was trying to take pictures of the crowd throwing stones at the police. He was doing a good job. That was like showing the working conditions of the police themselves.
Police doesn't think so.
What I'm saying is that he was doing a good job covering that other angle, that the police are also working in what? In horrible conditions. It was unfortunate that they're the same that brutalized him. When they cover the walk to work, when they cover processions and what people are saying, it informs everybody. Many people get to know what to do. The government would know how the population or the citizenry is thinking and can be able to address their problems. So the media does play a very important role, and the media can either promote peace or escalate a conflict. And it's important that they have their own independent regulatory frameworks to promote professionalism and ethical standards, so that at the end of the day what we have is accurate information on the situation, which can provide guidance to the rest of the country, to whoever is responsible, any responsible authority out there, as to what to do about a particular situation.
So you actually think it's possible for the media and the state to coexist without quarreling?
Yes, of course.
You think so?
It is possible, because their work is complementary. I think Peter talked about it. Their work is complementary, because if the state wants to communicate to the citizens, it has to use the media. If the citizens want to communicate to the state, they have to use the media. So there is no way that...
So they're kind of two-way messengers.
Yes. So they have to coexist.
Back and forth.
So they have to coexist in peace.
Mr. Vincent Mayanja, talk to us about self-censorship. How exactly does it occur?
Well, for example, earlier on, somebody was talking about the pay of journalists. But we also need to look at the survival of media houses. Most of the time, many media houses or media organizations survive because of the business they have. And sometimes this is in form of adverts, in form of announcements. And most of the time, these advertisers hold these media houses hostage. And I was about to give an example of the telecommunication companies we have. Normally they give subscribers a raw deal.
What do you mean?
Well, you get your phone, you want to call, and you can't call for about 4 hours.
Why? Oh, because
it has gone down. And this can persist for a week. But I can assure you, no newspaper will write about this or criticize.
Because of the advertising that comes
because of the advertisement that comes from these companies. So that also creates censorship. Then there is the biggest advertiser in the media industry is the government, as far as Uganda is concerned today. And government will determine who to give adverts. And if you are critical of the government, they may decide not to give you adverts. And we have seen so many papers coming up on the streets. They have very good content, but they can't sustain that because they can't access adverts from the main advertiser, that's the government. So that also creates censorship. Then there is political interference. That editorial policies of newspapers is no longer independent.
What do you mean?
What appears on the front page of a newspaper somewhere must be determined by the political persuasion trends in the country, and that is censorship. It is very bad and doesn't really help the development of the media industry. My take on this is that if really we want to have press freedom in this country, we should allow, first of all, we should promote professionalism in the media. I agree entirely that there are some times when you look at a few things and you say, no, I think we lack professionalism.
Right.
But at the same time, we need to develop a culture of allowing people to say what they want, and then you rebuttal by giving the right information.
Yes.
And I think any newspaper that is worth the name should be able to balance their stories doing that. If you want a story that is going to hit you, really to water it down, just give your point of view to the editor that this is this, and be available for a comment.
Yes.
The only problem is that many of these people are not available, and they switch off their phone, or they are very arrogant, they are not even willing to talk. That the journalist is going to carry a story that is one-sided. You have not given him an opportunity or her an opportunity to balance that story. If we have a balanced story, allow everybody to say what they want, and you say what you want. Then Ugandans are very, very, very sophisticated. That they can read between and say this is a serious story, this is not a serious story. That's why you have seen so many newspapers coming on the streets, and 2 months later they are not on the streets, because the leaders have cast their vote that this is not worth it.
They vote with their wallets. Yeah. Peter, talk to us about this self-censorship. How widespread is it in your own view?
I could talk about it from background of experience, having been in the media for some good years. It works in subtle ways. Vincent has handled the self-censorship at the level of the media, at the institution. But at the individual level, it comes almost subconsciously. Someone begins to feel that if he expressed a point of view, if he wrote a particular story in a certain way, then perhaps the state, the powers that be, will follow them. And some of it comes from the peers. Sometimes you're in the newsroom and someone tells you, know what, these are no-go areas. Don't write about this. There used to be a joke those days, you could touch anybody else, but don't dare touch some particular individuals or officers. And, it grows up. And, for example, the institution of the parliament has a legislature, because there are many. You find that people easily attack if you want to write a column and attack the Parliament of Uganda, that's very easy. By the time the Speaker or anybody else, Helen at Parliament, begins to put out a statement and so on, and normally, because Parliament is big and something, it's everybody's business. But there are some buttons you may not easily touch, and so that's how the issue of self-censorship comes in. Sometimes it is also a question of, because our pay is little.
Yes.
Sometimes you might be, you've compromised yourself. You have some relationships, and this ethical issue here, and the press is very, very strong. Perhaps you go to press conferences at a party conference. You have some political friends who have some good money. They sustain you under the table, and you find that you cannot be free to be able to express yourself. The other one is at the level of skills required to communicate, to be a journalist. The challenge we're having today, for instance, we're having a testimony of challenge. For example, in 1995, when the Press and Journalist Act was passed, requiring journalists to have a degree, minimum of a degree in journalism or mass communication, or a degree in anything else, and a diploma. At that time, Vincent will remember,
it never was practiced. It never was brought into practice. It was ignored.
It was not put in practice, but the law had the effect of having a number of people go back and acquire the required qualifications. Today, literally every newsroom in Uganda, even up country, is populated by Majority of the journalists there are university graduates. But the question is, has the quality improved? Have the standards gone up because the people are more, at least with the paper qualifications? The unanimous finding seems to be that it's not necessarily true. And so what is the problem? Is the training the correct one? And those are some of the other the challenges that we are seeing. Maybe the other issue I want to touch on is the spread of the government platforms. The spread of the government platforms. If you are aware, the New Vision is spreading, has been doing acquisitions. The New Vision will tell you that they are not a government newspaper anymore.
They are controlled by the government.
They will tell you that government holds 53%.
It's a majority shareholder. It appoints the bosses, the board and chief executive, and the editor by extension.
Yes, they have been going around the country buying platforms. The debate is out there whether that's a good thing or
well, but the state has always had Radio Uganda and the other.
And then UBC is also expanding. It's acquiring platforms, and what this means is that the government viewpoint is getting
a bigger voice
out there. And what does it mean in terms of the other voices?
All right,
that's the getting space to get for expression.
All right, listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. You can call in now on numbers 0414-348-111, 0312-260-390, 0312-261-390. When you call in, please tell us your name and where you're calling. Yes, my friend.
Good evening.
Good evening. Your name again?
Yeah, Jimmy is the name.
Yes, Jimmy. Spectrum, hello. Good evening, sir. Your name? Yes, Mr. Mtavazi. Spectrum, hello. Good evening, your name?
I'm Edmond.
Spectrum, hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Your name? Good evening. Your name? Spectrum, hello? Hello? Okay, hello? Alright, let's get back to the studio. Roselyne, you'd like to talk to us about, would like to respond to some of these comments?
I'd like to thank all the callers. I think most of them touched on the key issues. It's nice to touch on the ethical issue. It's important for the media to be independent, to be also ethical, and not to be swayed by corruption. Unfortunately, the media is not well facilitated. So you find that they are also looking for brown envelopes. And that creates a lot of problems. As Peter was highlighting, these people attend press conferences for certain parties, and these are the people that are maintaining them. So then where goes your independence, you see? Because you will also want to be sustained. If you're not well facilitated, you may seek other means, and that will touch on your independence. The other is partisan. Sometimes media report their own personal views, not necessarily what could have even happened. They are not reporting. There is factual reporting, there is opinion writing and things like that. But sometimes in the facts, because of that partisan nature, they then bring the partisan nature to the facts and twist them accordingly, and that of course ends up looking unprofessional. And I agree with the last speaker who spoke about the rights of journalists. I think it's important to look into the rights of journalists. As we noted in our report, their working conditions are terrible.
Yes.
I think they are some of the least paid professionals in the country. And they don't even make noise about it. But I know that they get very, very little money. And yet the kind of job they do, a very important job, by the way, the job of seeking and receiving information and then imparting it to the public. It's a very, very important job. It's similar to that of a teacher. Because if the media get the wrong information, they'll pass on the wrong information to the public. So it's a very important job, and media houses should invest in the welfare of the journalists. As we look into World Press Day, we shouldn't only look at the brutality of the police, but we should also look at their own
brutality.
Yes.
By the employer. Well,
Yeah.
Mr. Vincent Mayanja.
Well, I want to thank many of our callers. They really understood the issues well. But I will talk about the ethical issues. Yes, that is a major impediment to the development of the media in the country. And the proprietors of media houses should look into this. And on this one, I want also to state that, in fact, Peter is the one who raised it. Some people thought that having qualified journalists would improve the quality of the media we have. But for me, I'm one of the believers that journalism is not a profession per se. It's a talent. Somebody to write something that you enjoy reading does not require to have gone to a lecture theater in a journalism school. You just need to have the passion for writing. You must be knowing what to write about. The skills. In fact, in my years as a journalist, the people I have come across who are very good in journalism are not really that highly qualified as journalists. But they have been doing a great job, and when you read their piece, you say, yes, this one has written. So therefore, the media houses must really go out there and look for those talents and develop those talents. Then objectivity in the media. Yes, in fact, some people were talking about...
There's a saying that you are lucky if you are a journalist to survive journalism school. If you are a journalist and then you go through it to survive, to keep being a good journalist. Go on.
Well, I wanted to talk about objectivity. Objectivity, and somebody talked about journalists being partisan. Well, it is one thing being partisan, but it's another being professional. You can be partisan, but you go professional. I used to write. I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I remember one day the Right Honorable Prime Minister. He was then the Minister of State for Defense.
Yes.
Honorable Mama Mbabazi. I used to quote him so many times.
And you didn't like him too much politically?
We were not very friends politically, but we are friends as any other person.
So
but
you separate your own views.
I used to write, and one time he commented that no, what I know about Vincent is that he handles his stories professionally, and if there is a problem, then find it somewhere else.
Right.
And I'm a DP, I've been a DP, and any journalist who tells you that he has no side on the political front is lying to you.
Not necessarily. There's one in this room.
Are you sure?
That's me here, right? Never had a
but
side.
you must be having some partisan opinion about situations. Because you must have a side in any debate.
I have a side in the middle. Yeah. Anyhow. All right. So, Peter, let's take from there.
With that, anybody will have a side, but do you show that side when you are writing the story?
Peter,
maybe just to take up the point Vincent was raising. I find that not only in this current context of journalism and so on, generally in our country, we've reduced our debates and discourse to party politics. A lot of times people are judged whatever they are contributing from the viewpoint of whether they are NRM or they are FDC or they are opposition, and that clouds the conversation, and I feel like we should move it away from there, because I don't know whether somebody has done research. I would imagine majority of Ugandans out there, I may not be necessarily belonging to these parties, the parties that we have, but they care about Uganda and about the common good and so on. But a lot of times this partisan thing comes up, and even if people raising it, you don't know where. They also have partisan interests. I heard people have been accusing the Uganda police of being partisan, but I heard the police also accusing the media instead of being partisan. And when you are locked up in that debate of being partisan and so on, some of the issues get lost. Yeah.
All right, we have to go. Thank you very much indeed, dear. Maybe just before we go, Roselyne, update us on these complaints. As you say, this for the human rights defenders, not just for journalists, it's human rights defenders who could be civil society people.
Yes, it's for human rights defenders. But that doesn't mean that the media is excluded.
No, it's legitimate. But basically, if they come to your office, they should ask for the HRD desk, the Human Rights Defenders desk.
They can ask for the Human Rights Defenders desk, but they can also ask for anybody who ready to receive their complaint.
All right. We have to go. Thank you very much, dear guest, Miss Roselyne Karugonjo Segawa, Director of Inspections and Monitoring at the Uganda Human Rights Commission. Thank you very much for coming to Spectrum tonight.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening to me.
Mr. Peter Okello Jabweli from the Media Council of Uganda, also a veteran journalist. Thank you for coming to Spectrum tonight. Mr. Vincent Mayanja, veteran journalist as well, now Deputy Secretary General of the Democratic Party. He says he's always been a DP, but it never showed in his work. He would keep his green colors somewhere and put them on. Well, thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond Kizito. Never belong to any political party, never will probably. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond Kizito. Spectrum will be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English.
Everybody is a star, but some stars shine brighter. Oh yeah.